Hey YouTube friends, Anne here. This video is another attempt of many to make a short version of the story of how I became a Christian, my testimony. Let's see if I can do it under 20 minutes, because I need to send it to someone with a short attention span. Heavenly Father Jehovah, I give you glory and honor and praise because you are worthy. Please give me your words, your wisdom, for your glory, not mine. Witness to who you want. Send your Holy Spirit. In Yeshua's name, amen. Okay, specifically this video is for people from what I almost would call my previous life before I became a Christian, because I've changed so much you probably don't recognize me, which is, in my opinion, good. I like it. How did I go from, pretty average person of the world to ridiculous Jesus freak, and I happily admit it. Like, I would die for God. If he wanted me to die for him, totally would, in a heartbeat. Like, if he says, like, go be a missionary in Africa, I totally would. If he says, don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that, I would do anything for God, okay? How did I reach this point? I wasn't raised this way. So obviously something dramatic had to happen in my life, right? And if you do know me from my previous life, you know that I'm a huge nerd, especially science. I'm a huge science nerd. I was in the science bowl in high school. Science club for science bowl. I was like top of my class in a really advanced academic program. Like, I was the nerd of the nerds. Like, science was my god, basically, back then. Now, just so you know, I am still a huge science nerd. And I would love to have a discussion with you if you ever want about creation science, because you would be amazed at the inaccuracies of what's taught in public textbooks and the interestingly scientifically accurate theories regarding creation science, if you ever want. Anyway, I am still a huge science nerd. Huge intellectual minded person is just huge nerd still. But how did I start believing in God? Any scientifically minded person is going to say, well, there's no evidence for God, at least according to the majority of the world. I was one of those. Good thing I have evidence. Other than creation science, which is plenty of evidence on its own, I actually have scientific proof God saved my life. I am blessed beyond belief. I'm one of the fortunate ones. Although I don't think it's like fortune or luck. I think it's design. And I think that he chose to help me because I honestly asked him for help. And a lot of people don't. And I asked intending to follow him and obey him. That's the other thing. He's not my genie. I don't like just get to ask and receive like magic. It's a relationship. I give to him and he gives to me. But anyway, what scientific proof? What miracles happened? I'm getting there. So, the backstory is that I was, I've had severe health problems since I was about 12 years old, honestly. I just got this like mystery flu type thing when I was 12 and it never really fully went away. I went to hundreds of doctors by the time I was 21. I had been to every specialist 5 times over and no one knew what it was. A few of them were like, all right, well, they diagnosed like some sub disorders, like, okay, chronic migraines, fibromyalgia, things like that. But in my gut, I just knew that wasn't what it was. I was like, those are symptoms. Fibromyalgia is just chronic pain and fatigue and brain fog, and that's a symptom of something. Like, pain is a symptom, not a diagnosis. Pain is a symptom from a disorder somewhere. So, I kept searching. I had been raised Catholic, stopped being Catholic probably by the time I was like 14, for all the typical reasons. You know, no evidence, it felt like, for God, life sucks, everything sucks, people are mean, where's God, I don't see answers to prayers, school teaches me all this stuff that contradicts God, all the typical things that people go through these days. So I was pretty much atheist agnostic as a teenager. I was like, maybe God is somewhere. I felt like in my gut, yeah, sure, God was real somewhere, but maybe he was just some distant creative force like the universe or karma or, you know, whatever. Krishna, for all I knew. I didn't know. He was just, somewhere. Big dude with a beard in the sky who didn't care, maybe. I didn't know. So I was like agnostic atheist probably in like high school. Maybe, and in middle school too. I had never known anyone who'd had miracles happen to them, or anyone who had like an active relationship with God. I didn't know that was possible. So fast forward as I'm getting older and getting older and getting older, and I'm getting sicker and sicker and sicker. I could feel it in my body. I was just getting worse and worse and worse. I knew that I was slowly dying, and I didn't know what was causing it, but I could just feel the decay in my body, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong, but I'm probably going to be dead by the time I'm like 30, you know, at this rate, because I just feel myself getting so much worse. The fatigue gets worse, the pain gets worse, the confusion and neurological problems kept getting worse. If you're one of my teachers, I know I was really smart in school because the good Lord blessed me with a good brain, but to tell you the truth, I was struggling. I had severe neurological issues like dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADD, poor short-term memory, just anxiety, and none of it was like my personality. It was just severe neurological problems that I was having from, you'll see why. And they kept getting worse. It kept getting harder and harder to concentrate in school. And worse, I kept getting sick all the time in school. I had like no immune system. I had a really weak immune system. I caught every cold that came my way. I was sick every other week with like a cold or the flu, out for just days on end in bed. I was never rested. I never got enough sleep. I could sleep for 16 or 24 hours and still be exhausted as if I slept for one. It was miserable. It made waking up early for school very hard. Eventually, when I was 16, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, which is actually one of the less dangerous cancers. And it sucked, sure. But honestly, thyroid cancer makes the other stuff I went through look like kittens. Or no, thyroid cancer looks like kittens compared to the other stuff I'm about to describe. In fact, people who have had these illnesses and have cancer often say these illnesses are much worse than cancer. They're like long-term, just like almost like long-term cancer. And sure, there's worse cancers, like the really deathly ones, but anyway. Anyway, I was sick all the time. No one knew what it was. Doctors didn't care. My family, honestly, they didn't care. My friends didn't care. I was falling behind in school. By the time the thyroid cancer came when I was 16, I was just like, screw this, I give up. Honestly, I was too tired to keep fighting. I was tired all the time, everything hurt all the time, and no one was helping me, and I was behind, and I just gave up, honestly. I struggled on kind of for a couple years-ish in high school, like probably through junior year, but I was really not into it very much. I went from being the top of my class in an advanced program. I went from being recruited to go to Yale. Yale was in the midst of recruiting me, just based on my pre-SAT scores, to dropping out of high school because I couldn't handle it. Who can handle being in bed for every other week and not knowing what's the matter? I mean, really. So then I gave up for a few years. Really just spent like probably 3 years on the couch watching Netflix. Feeling alone, didn't know where God is, prayed to him a couple of times, didn't get any answers, gave up. When I was 19, I met someone, ended up getting engaged to him. He gave me a new lease on life. He gave me something worth fighting for. So I started to care. I started to get a job and, you know, get my GED and started to go to doctors again to get diagnosed again. through random happenstance that I firmly believe is a miracle, I met a girl at a party when I was 21 who told me about chronic Lyme disease. And she just begged me to go to her doctor. She said, you have every symptom. It's called the Great Imitator. It mimics all the major illnesses: lupus, fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. It actually causes them. There's a doctor in Germany who's reversed over 600 cases of lupus, MS, fibromyalgia, Parkinson's. 600 patients, because every single one of them, it was Lyme disease and mold poisoning, but we're getting there. I went to her doctor. I had Lyme disease. For the first time in my life, someone diagnosed me correctly. It's a severe bacterial infection. It's very insidious. It hides in your own cells. So it actually, after 30 days of having it, you stop producing antibodies to it. So most blood tests don't detect it, which is why people missed it for, what was it at that point, 9 years? It's very difficult to diagnose unless you specifically look for it with like specialized testing. There's like 2 labs in the entire country that can do that kind of testing. I had Lyme disease. I got really hopeful. I started doing treatment, started getting better for the first time in my life. Energy was going up, my immune system was getting stronger. It was great. But after a few months of treatment, I took a nosedive. And my brilliant Lyme disease doctor didn't know why. None of the doctors I went to knew why, and I started going to all of them because I got so sick. I'm talking like bedridden, level sick, to a point I'd never been. Like, I thought I was dying. Like, it was like having the flu all the time. It felt like every inch of my body was being stabbed with knives. Every square inch was an excruciating pain, millions of knives stabbing me. It felt like I was so weak, I couldn't walk at all. I had to have someone help me walk to the bathroom 10 feet down the hall. I couldn't stand on my own. I couldn't stand for long. I couldn't cook. I couldn't feed myself. I remember I was at my parents' house at that time. I looked up at my dad and I was in bed and I said, Dad, you have to cook me food and bring me food because I can't make it to the kitchen and I'm gonna starve. I'm not gonna eat today if you don't bring me food. I couldn't make it down the stairs to the kitchen. I started to go blind. My eyes actually worked fine, but I was going neurologically blind. I had such bad neurological problems. My brain was shutting down and it couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. You could have thrown a ball straight at my face and I wouldn't have caught it because I couldn't process what I was seeing. I couldn't have registered the motion. I was getting hundreds of food allergies, probably 10 new food allergies a week, and doctors didn't know why. I was going down the list of foods. This was over the span of a few months. After a few months, I had barely anything left to eat. I had 9 foods left that I wasn't allergic to. 9. And I was terrified I was going to starve to death because I was like, what happens when I become allergic to those 9? In case you're wondering, because people always ask, chicken, salmon, turkey, green beans, cabbage, cauliflower, radishes, spinach, broccoli. Broccoli, green beans, cabbage, cauliflower, radishes, cabbage, spinach. Dang, what did I miss? I'm really tired and have a headache right now. Forgive me. Anyway, 9 foods. And of those foods, like, they had to be boiled, like, for like 20 minutes, like 10 to 20 minutes, mushy baby food softs, chopped into little pieces, boiled, super squishy, like for babies to eat, because that was all my digestion could handle. It took me like hours a day to cook and be able to eat it. Like, not that I could stand for that long, so I was slowly starving to death. I was laying in bed, just like thinking I was gonna die. My Lyme disease doctors has given up on me. All the doctors in the hospitals have given up on me. No one knew what it was. I had horrible rashes that had grown on my hands. I didn't have a back of hand, guys. I had open flesh. The rashes were just like these open sores, like yellow oozing sores. I had this like no skin. I had just had flesh, open wounds. It was horrible, and they burned. I had like these huge white bandages, and they were spreading. And I was like, this sucks. I was in bed. And I was just waiting to die. And I was on Facebook reading, you know, as much as I barely could. Not that I could much, but I was still trying to figure out what was wrong. I was in a Lyme disease group on Facebook, and someone posted an article, and it talked about how if you have Lyme disease and then you get black mold poisoning on top of it, it's like fire and dynamite. It'll overwhelm your system and kill you. And honestly, this is what happened. Honest to goodness, solid truth, I don't lie. A voice spoke in my soul. The loudest voice I've ever heard, and the most loving voice I've ever heard, and the kindest and purest and most truthful voice I've ever heard. In fact, the voice was pure truth. It was truth itself. And this voice spoke, and he said, I'm the Christian God. I see everything about you. I know everything about you. You have black mold poisoning, and that's what's hurting you. And it's like this article just like flew off the screen and just downloaded into my soul. And I fit every symptom, and it was just like this earth-shattering revelation, and this voice just changed my whole life. It just shattered everything I'd ever comprehended, because at that point I didn't believe God was real, honestly. Not to mention, if he was, like, definitely not the Christian God. At that point I was actually Buddhist, to tell you the truth. I decided to be Buddhist. I definitely didn't think the Christian God was real. But it just, this voice was pure truth, and I knew he couldn't lie. He was incapable of it. And he was right. I was like, this is what I have. This is what I have. So I called my mom and dad, and I'm like, Mom, Dad, I have to get out of this house. This house has mold. It's killing me. And they laughed, and they said, no, we don't see mold anywhere. You don't have mold poisoning. And I said, no, you don't understand. God spoke. God spoke. They're like, God doesn't speak. I'm like, God spoke. I have mold poisoning. I need to get out of this house. So I literally crawled out of bed, threw my belongings in a duffel bag, and crawled out of that house and refused to go back in. I said, there is mold in this house, whether you see it or not. And I refused to go back inside. I spent a week at an aunt and uncle's house, and they had a really like $1 million house, really fancy, definitely very well built. No mold. In 1 week, I went from bedridden and paralyzed, going blind, to weak to walk, to 90% recovered. About as healthy as you see me now. Okay, I'm healthier now, but like way recovered, way more. I wasn't dying anymore. I could walk, I could think clearly, I could see, I had so much energy. It was the house. It is the house I'd grown up in, by the way, so. As it turns out, mold grew in my closet when I was 12. And that's what made me sick. That was what the mystery flu was. I remember seeing it grow in my closet when I was 12. I told my dad, and he just wiped it up. He didn't know that that's not how to remediate mold properly. By the way, if you ever see mold, don't spray it with bleach. I beg you. Bleach just angers it. Bleach just bleaches it white. It's still there. It just bleaches it white, and you just angered it. So what happens is mold is poisonous. And doctors aren't actually trained on this very much in medical school. They're trained on fungal mold infections, like lung infections, but that's really only like 10% of the way mold ever kills anybody. 90%, it's poisonous. Or doctors are trained on allergies. You don't have to be allergic to it. It's poisonous. It's like rat poison in your walls. You don't have to be allergic to rat poison for rat poison to poison you. It's worse than asbestos. Yet no one's trained in medical school on it. Really, very little. I was being poisoned. And what happened, if anything, the mold caused the Lyme disease. It compromised my immune system, and the Lyme disease came. for all I know. And then that summer when I was 21, we had a fresh leak we didn't know about. Every time it rained, I would get sicker and the rashes would grow. And we couldn't see the leak. It was somewhere in the basement. We couldn't see it, but it was there. You will never see 90% of mold in your house, 99% even. Do you see if it leaks behind your dishwasher? No. Do you see if it's leaking behind your refrigerator into your floor? No. Do you see if it's leaking, if there's that crack in your shower and it's leaking behind your tile? No. We have miles of pipes. Do you see 90%? You don't see 90% of your pipes. And we have very shifting soil in Colorado. Houses shift half an inch, a few cracks open up in the wall, in the ceiling, in the floor, in the pipes, slow drips, and our modern building materials are perfect mold food. It's actually an epidemic. Remember, I told you, causes multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, all those things. For a while, their doctors did think I had lupus, but it wasn't lupus. Anyway, I went to mold specialists. They tested me. They're like, textbook mold poisoning patient, you know? You have mold infections in your sinuses, mold infections in your digestion. That's why I was getting the food allergies. It had torn holes in my intestines. So I was like leaking food into my blood and becoming allergic to it. I had mold infections, actually fungal infections in my blood even. I had huge toxin load. I was just pouring out toxins. I don't know if I have a genetic disorder where I can't filter out mold. It's a possibility, but the test is like really expensive, so I haven't taken it. Or if it's just the Lyme disease impairing the detox, because Lyme disease can do that too. Lyme disease can block you from detoxing mold. But either way, that's why I was sick and my parents weren't. Their immune system wasn't compromised. They could filter it out. So, I have medically documented proof that God spoke to me and correctly diagnosed me when hundreds of doctors couldn't. I had never heard of mold poisoning in my life. The Christian God that spoke to me was correct. I have dozens of blood tests to prove it. Scientific proof God spoke to me and saved my life. I suppose I was given a burning bush. I'm very thankful. God is reaching out to us all the time. I'm not unique. He loves every single one of us as much as he loves me. I was just one of the few to reach back and grasp his hand because I had started to pray. I actually had prayed when I was a kid. I remember I'd told him he could have my life when I was a kid and then forgotten. He had to bring the memory back to me just like this year. I'm 26 and he brought me a memory when I was 6. And I asked him if I could serve him. I'm just one of the few that reached back. He reaches out to us all day long, and we can't experience him until we reach back. He's reaching out like this, and it's not until we take his hand that we can start experiencing him. We take his hand by praying, by reading the Bible, by trying to obey him. My life right now is incredible. Just the stories I could tell you. If you want to check out my YouTube channel, it contains a lot of them. I mean, ridiculous things, pure miracles all the time. Like, my life is just like insanely supernatural all the time. It's so cool. Like, angels save me from car crashes. Like, God sent me $20,000. Like, crazy cool stuff happens. And in exchange, it's a relationship. In exchange, I follow him, I obey him, I serve him, I do ministry. I go where he wants me to go. I do what he wants me to do. And it's the greatest thing ever. It's like my life's constant adventure. So, anything else you want me to say? I'm not even afraid to die now. It's not my time yet, but I'm not afraid. I know what's going to happen to me after this. I know who I've been serving. I know that the things I do matter forever, and they will last. And I know I'm going to stand before him and give account, because everyone, even Christians, give account for what they've done. And sure, I've made mistakes, but there's a lot of good things in the good tally account too, and I'm excited to see him. Anything else you want me to say, God? Guys, this is part 1 of the story, but I told you I'd make it short, under 20 minutes, and I'm at 26. So there's a few more miracles, ridiculously cool miracles that happened along the way towards this journey, but this is the short version of what happened. But basically, anyone can have what I have. I'm not unique. I just prayed to God and I said, Lord, God, I believe you're real. I believe your son Jesus is real. I don't understand everything and I don't need to. I'm not going to let what I don't know stop me from what I do know, which is that you're real and you love me and you want me to obey you. So I give you my whole life. I just surrender it all. You saved it. I'd be dead without you. So you get to have it all, every inch. And in exchange, I want a relationship with you. Help me be happy. And you get to have my life. It's almost like a marriage. So, if you liked that, stay tuned for part 2. Because more cool stuff happens. But hey, that's the short version.